So we are here to talk about sports fandom, the intersection of fandom and apps. I think what's so fascinating about sports fandom is that sports is as old as time, yet somehow sports continues to grow and grow and grow and grow. So what we've done was essentially combine both Reddit data and intelligence and Sensor Tower's data and intelligence to create what is the state of the state regarding both apps and sports fandom. So maybe we'll start with the state of the state. What is the state of the sports economy and app economy?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And just starting off, I think defining what is the sports economy is really helpful because it's changed a lot over even the past 5 or 10 years. Maybe 10 years ago when you're thinking about the sports economy, you've got, you're talking about going to the games, watching TV, watching sports on TV, and it's very focused around the event itself. But the modern sports fan interacts with sports in a ton of different and novel ways. We have the person while they're watching the game on their TV, they're also gambling on the game, or they're placing bets, they're checking their fantasy football score, they're ordering food. And then even beyond that, there's a lot of different interactions, even outside of the sports event itself. So, the modern sports fan, I think we say in this report, is the modern sports fan is always on. They're going on places like Reddit to chat with communities about their favorite teams throughout the week. They're listening to fantasy football podcasts. And so, in today's world, basically, sports fans are just always on, and you have to reach them even beyond these marquee events. And we even see this in our data. So we were looking at sports app downloads in particular. And as of 10 years ago, we would see huge spikes in downloads around individual sports events or seasons. So the biggest example is at the start of the NFL season, we would see downloads would increase 74% back in 2015 in September. 10 years later, that spike we see in September is about half as large. And it's not that we have lost sports fans in the NFL, it's just that every other time of year has become more important. And so that's something we've seen, and I think we have to consider is that you have to reach these sports fans throughout the calendar year.
So do we know specifically what else these sports fans are doing while watching their game, their IP, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, it ends up being a ton of different things. And one other thing I'd like to point out too is it's across devices. So you're no longer just, you have the game up on the big screen and you're just watching the game, eating snacks. You're now on your phone at the same time. You're checking your bets. You're posting on places like Reddit, you're checking, social media posts, and again, checking fantasy scores. And so it's just a ton of different interactions. And even outside of sports, again, maybe you want to order food or do something like that too as well.
So let's pull on one thread. I think something that you had mentioned that we've thought a lot about is how the season itself is almost now agnostic or ignorable, where perhaps one point in time, sports fandom was, I'm going to tune in. Now is the moment in which I engage. That seems to be completely thrown out the window now.
Yeah, and it's not that these big sports moments don't matter. You really should pay attention during, the start of the NFL season's a big one, March Madness, the start of basically any league season as well. But it just means that you need to keep paying attention beyond that as well. It's not just about adding new users. So if we look at our data, you see a huge spike in downloads around these key events. But if we look at our engagement metrics, our time spent, monetization revenue, those types of things, those extend far beyond that initial window. And I think that's what marketers need to pay attention to as well.
So we're almost post-season, not just post-season, but quite literally post the idea of sports even having a season. So you had mentioned that in regards to the apps, but something we also see in regards to the screen views or engagement with sports. Yes, there is a spike during the season or a spike during the game, but we also see the spikes prior when there's a tailgate. We see a spike during the post game, but for the most part, it really doesn't dip off when there's an off season. That people are constantly engaging even when there are no games happening, period.
Yep, that's true. And so, I mean, if we think about different verticals, it will vary a little bit by vertical. So sports betting, for example, that is pretty tied to the seasonal calendar. Again, most of the time spent is during the NFL season. You'll see March Madness, the Kentucky Derby, all of those types of big events. But, for even sports video games, people stick around during the off season. And then for other, verticals like retail and food and drink, I mentioned a couple of times, I think people wanting to order food during the Super Bowl or something like that. Well, these companies want to keep those people around beyond that. So, for example, I think in our data, we saw that food delivery app sessions were up about 5% for some of the marquee games like the Super Bowl, like the World Series, things like that. But, so 5% boost, it's something, it's meaningful, but it's really important for these companies to keep those people around, which I think is why we don't see like a huge spike around the Super Bowl. These people are coming back, and that's what really matters. And I guess to extend it to, your data, do we see that the spikes in conversations on Reddit actually correspond with some of these spikes in downloads and revenue that we're seeing on the mobile side?
We see that. We also see in regards to what I mentioned before, there's almost like 3 for every moment. So we see the spike of the game itself, where people are tuning in to discuss in real time different plays, memes, individual clips. At this point, the NFL or different leagues are posting directly to the platform as well. But we also see about like 24 hours prior, another big blip. And what's happening there is that people are essentially tailgating or prepping for what is happening, as well as the next 24 hours afterwards as well. There's a pattern we see across all different types of entertainment. So for example, a reality TV, similar pattern. We see a big spike when there's an airing of an episode, but a similar spike prior, which is this tailgate experience of people are discussing their conspiracies and expectations and predictions. And then throughout the rest of the week, this kind of long tail, people still discussing the thing. And then again, 24 hours prior, again, the night of, you pick any different fandom and it's the same thing time and time again, where yes, there are some spikes, but for the most part, it's always on.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. It feels like you could almost use that to give you a sense of where the demand is coming ahead of time.
Totally.
Really
100%. So you had discussed different app activities. Can you give us the kind of the state of the state in regards to the app economy holistically? So what's happening there?
Sure. So overall, the mobile economy is still, doing really strongly. I think, we saw quite a bit of changes around the pandemic, and that actually caused a huge spike in demand for mobile, maybe counterintuitively. And so then we actually have seen recently a little bit more of digital fatigue, right? People wanting to get back out in the real world. And we actually saw, like, for example, time spent on social media in the US actually declined for the first time year over year in 2024. However, it did increase again in 2025. It seems to be leveling out quite a bit. And I think how mobile companies are approaching this is they're finding ways to connect people across devices and then also in the real world. So, an example I like to think of is if you're going to, again, you want to pick up food for your Super Bowl party, you're going to the grocery store, they make it super easy to have your rewards card in-app and just scan it, get your coupons all there, and maybe save some money while you're at the grocery store. That also, of course, improves customer loyalty. And so everything's kind of integrated between mobile and the real world in ways that make it really frictionless and really easy for people to kind of, interact across these channels.
So what we know is that those who are interested in sports fandom on Reddit are more likely to be interested in anything else. Or further, Redditors who are interested in sports happen to be more interested in that IP or that league more than anyone else. So if you ask people, how big of a fan are you on any given league, those on Reddit are more likely to rate themselves higher than those on any other social platform. And in the same way, not only are they bigger fans in regards to sports, pick a topic. It could be auto, it could be puzzling, it could be pets. What you're getting is this intersection of passion, that those who are more interested in sports are more interested in everything else. So I guess the question I have for you is, when it comes to the intersection of that behavior between, let's say, sports and other activities, gaming, food and beverage, etc., what do we know in regards to, let's call it cross-pollination, or the intersection between that sports fandom and other purchasing behaviors?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think, when you're talking about each vertical, they interact in different ways. And in our data, it actually shows up in different ways. So, when you're talking about sports games like your Madden, your EA Sports FC, those are going to be more clearly tied to the sports calendar, although people will stay engaged year round. When you're talking about things like retail and food and drink, it's a little bit harder to find in the data itself. I think, I mentioned the food delivery sessions climbed 5%. So it's not nothing, but it's just a little bit harder to show up. You kind of have to dig a little bit deeper into how the specific consumers who are interacting this, that sports fan audience is interacting with this to see where you're actually getting that boost in terms of retail. You want, for example, the person who's buying gear for their favorite team, you want them to stick around where if the retailer offers sneakers, they're buying sneakers for their back to school season too. And so that's where you can look at the data and try to see where these people are kind of going throughout the calendar year.
Makes sense. So I guess the question is, then what? Or what do we do then? So how do you engage in that fandom?
Yeah, so I think, one thing you mentioned is the personas. You want to find who the people are that you want to reach for all these different events. And then you want to keep them engaged throughout the events as well. So it's not just about adding new users. It's keeping them focused afterwards and continuing to engage them. And again, across channels too. Having that omni-channel strategy is very important as well.
So I think our answer is, well, first acknowledging the fact that even though people are interested in sports, that's not to say they aren't interested in anything else. We know it's, in fact, the opposite. Those interested in sports are more likely to be interested in all these other topics. So even if you're not even necessarily interested in getting in front of a sports fan, you could get in front of them through sports specifically. And further, I think the way in which we think about it, that is, it behooves us to think about, is viewing these communities and culture as almost a dinner party, where in order to be a good dinner party guest, we have to have good dinner party etiquette. And what's so problematic at times is when organizations come in with the megaphone to say, pay attention to me, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. And a good dinner party guest, firstly, knows the vibe of the room before showing up. They know the etiquette. They know who's going to be there. They've done their social listening. The second is they're not just making it about themselves. They're making about really the fans or those they hope to resonate with. They're asking questions. They're allowing other people to ask them questions. They have interesting stories to tell. The third is that they're not showing up empty-handed. You don't show up to a dinner party empty-handed. In the same way, are you bringing something of value? For organizations, that could be talent, exclusivity, access, discounts, whatever it may be. And then I think also we have to acknowledge the fact that when you enter a community, that's not your home. It's a shared social space. Culture is not owned by an organization. So what that means is that you don't get to put your feet up on the couch or change the music, but rather can you be respectful of those who are already there, and more so add value, right, and not take away. And I think to wrap that all up, I think the organizations that show up again with that megaphone trying to make it about themselves and not add value, not making it about other people, end up, the how do you do fellow kids meme. So I think at the end of the day, if we were to engage with the fandom, with those who are most intense and most passionate about a given topic, how as organizations do we show up and amplify that, fund that, platform that, honor that, celebrate that, rather than take away and make it about ourselves? And I think the brands that do that are those that succeed.
Yeah, that meme mentioned felt too close to home. I feel like I'm closer and closer to that meme every day. So yeah, I guess just to wrap it out, if you were to give advice to someone looking to activate around the NFL, NBA, or MLB coming seasons, there's going to be something coming soon. What do you think is the biggest missed opportunity right now?
The biggest missed opportunity is just not doing anything, period. At this point, we're looking at 16 billion views to sports every single month. So there's no really way that you could go wrong with it. I think it's showing up, it's adding value, it's acknowledging that these are people in their home caring about the thing they care most about, and to add to it rather than take away from it. I think further, these people are multidimensional. They care about other things beyond just sports, and can we reach them in those other places as well, not just in r/sports.
Yeah, I encourage everyone here to maybe just pay attention for the next couple of days and just look at where you see sports advertising show up, because it'll be there even if you notice it or not. I was downloading the Marriott Bonvoy app before this travel, and I saw a in-app event for the upcoming World Cup, because they're a sponsor for that. So it really is, you mentioned, the biggest mistake you can make is not doing enough, not doing anything. The biggest brands, I feel like, are doing everything, right? They're everywhere. They take advantage of these partnerships across all their channels. Even small things like in-app events become important. Why not take advantage of it?
On that note, Jonathan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.